I want to tell you about a 25-year-old daughter of a Japanese-American immigrant. She had set sail for her homeland of Japan. She was born here, but she was going to go see a sick relative. Well, then December 7th, 1941 happened, and now she was trapped there because the war happened, and we're not going to bring in people from Japan, especially while we're putting people up in internment camps. We're not going to bring this, 20-something back into the United States. She was steadfast in her patriotism. She loved the country. She declared at one point, "A tiger doesn't change its stripes." Now, who did she declare that to? The Japanese government. Because the Japanese government told her she had to renounce her American citizenship, and she said, "A tiger does not change its stripes." Well, she took a typing job. She was actually friendly with the American POWs, and she had access to them. And it came out later that she had smuggled food and medicine to the POWs. She eventually found work as a typist to make ends meet while she was on the outs, and she ended up at a place called Radio Tokyo. She was first recruited by Australian POW Major Charles Cousins, and he said, "You should be a host." It wasn't a huge role. There were 20 minutes here and there. The Japanese had wanted her to broadcast American propaganda and use the POWs to do it to demoralize American troops, but she said no, she wouldn't do it. She actually devised a plan of sending messages to our troops to help our troops. The Japanese didn't catch her. Her stage name was Anne, and it was just short for announcer. But everybody knows her by the nickname Tokyo Rose. Tokyo Rose. That's what she used on the air. And after the war ended, she was anxious to come back home. She was really excited to not only come back home, but to tell the story. A reporter reached out to her, promising her $2,000 for an interview to tell her story. Well, she wanted to go home. $2,000, she didn't have the money to go home, and that was it. It was her ticket home. So she agreed for the interview because, after all, she's an American citizen. She told her story. She said, "The POWs and me, we didn't go along with the Japanese propaganda plan." She was proud of it. She left the interview thinking, this is going to be great. But when the story publication was released, she realized she had been lied to. It was titled, "Trader's Pay. Tokyo Rose got 100 yen a month, $6.60. As soon as that happened, there was a knock on her door from 3 officers and a master sergeant from the Army Counterintelligence Corps. She was under arrest. She was deemed a traitor to her country. A traitor? There was evidence. The POWs knew, right? Didn't stop anybody. The prosecution plowed forward. It was the most expensive trial in the United States history up until that time. And why was it so expensive? Because they had to bribe people and get them to shut up. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison. She served 6 years of a 10-year sentence before the witnesses, the POWs, began to admit they were lying during the trial, and this was wrong. But the damage was already done. You know Tokyo Rose. Tokyo Rose was a traitor, right? You know that. We all know that. While she was in prison and torn away from her family, her mother died in a Japanese internment camp. She had her country stolen from her, both her homeland and her home of America, both of them. She wasn't wanted in any place. And it all started with a lie, and furthered by lies on top of lies. How did she possibly go to prison? Why? Why did they do that to her? Well, because the press thought it was a good story. It was a great story. Everybody knows Tokyo Rose. We're going to get that story. And they already had it written before they ever met her. And the administration needed good headlines. There was an election. So putting her behind bars, getting the real bad Tokyo Rose, that worked. The true groups, separately or together, I'm not really sure. They just decided it's okay to destroy somebody's life because they knew the truth anyway. And the truth, doesn't really matter. The ends justify the means.